There's high-level studies done on the Qur'an, what's known as stylometric analysis, where basically the text is analyzed through a computer system, and it was determined that the entire Qur'an is from one author, right? And you apply this like the Book of Mormon, there's multiple authors. And this is based on vocabulary, syntax, grammar. So the Qur'an has one author, right? And this was applied to like the New Testament Gospels or the letters of Paul, right? So 13 letters in the New Testament attributed to Paul. But when stylometric analysis is applied to the letters, 6 of them were discovered to be forgeries. And this is like the consensus of historians, that there's forgeries in the New Testament in Paul's name. And then another type of analysis was done on the hadith, at least in Bukhari. And this was done by a researcher in Algeria. It's really cutting edge stuff. And it discovered, based on the data, that the speaker in Bukhari is different than the Qur'an. There's 2 different speakers. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ is not the author of the Qur'an. And this is what the highest type of analysis shows. That's just looking at the Qur'an linguistically. And there's many other things we can say about that. Even little things like how the Qur'an avoids the historical errors of the Bible, because the common trope amongst the Orientalists is the Prophet ﷺ wrote the Qur'an, he copied the Bible, he plagiarized the Bible. And this charge is mentioned in the Qur'an itself. Right? You're just a forger. But أكثرهم لا يعلمون لا يعقلون. The majority of them don't know, right? So for example, if you ask an Egyptologist about ancient Egypt, when were the kings of Egypt first called pharaohs, right? An Egyptologist will tell you by the 18th or 19th dynasty of the New Kingdom, right? In other words, the king at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, who's 15th or 16th dynasty, the king was not called pharaoh, it's just called king, whatever the word is, king, right? Now in Genesis, the king is called Pharaoh at the time of Joseph, so that's an error. That's called an anachronism, historical error. An anachronism is something outside of its time frame, right? It's like you watch a movie sometimes, a movie that's based in like the Middle Ages, and you see an actor wearing a Rolex. That's an anachronism, it shouldn't be there, right? Or it's like if I say George Washington was a Mormon. Well, that's an anachronism. There were no such things as Mormons at the time of George Washington, right? So the Bible has this historical error. Interestingly, the story of Yusuf is in the Qur'an, but in Surah Yusuf, the king is called Malik. He's not called Fir'aun. And then when we get to Musa alayhi salam, 18th dynasty or 19th, depending on who you think the pharaoh is, Tutmos III or Ramses II, I think Tutmos III. But اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. So it's interesting, the Qur'an confirms aspects of these biblical stories, but then it avoids these historical problems, right? And there's many examples like this.